We've got to go back a fair way to start thinking about these problems. We've got some recent solutions that have been put forward, or solutions. I call them solutions. Let's just put a fence around it. So if we put a fence around that mud flat, are the oysters going to come back? Well, there's a fence around that mud flat. It's called a sanctuary zone. We're not addressing the threats to the waterway if we only address fishing. Marine parks only address fishing. They're an absolutely farcical measure to address the problems that are happening in our waterways with pollution. And on a scale, I think fishing is probably but a small wedge of the pie when we look at impacts on the waterway. When we look at where does this material come from? So where's all this sediment, where's all this material coming from? This is in my home river in northern New South Wales. The local council undertook a survey and they found most of these pollutants are principally derived from agricultural land. So the point of origin is agriculture. Broadly speaking, all different types with various levels of contribution. Queensland has taken the novel approach of trying to grade and measure its waterways. I just love the title, Healthy Waterways. But just to let you know, the grading, it's like a high school grading thing. So it just runs from A, for a top class student, you get an A+. If you're a Dumbo, you get an F, but you tried hard. Well, the Logan tried hard and failed. The Albert failed. These rivers are dead. There is no G. You can't go to G. The whole of Moreton Bay scored a C. One of the great waterways in the nation scored a C. You want dugongs? You don't get dugongs with a C. You don't get a smiley stamp for a C. This is what Queensland has, and some of the things that are impacting on it are the problems that are happening in the Noosa. Noosa slipped. Must have had a few too many big dice, went from its A status, slipped to B. And I can inform you that it will just keep on sliding unless there are major changes to your catchment. It's a one-way street. These are all going south. This is how it happens. Algae at the bottom of the food web. Slowly we move up. We get oysters and mussels eating these things, prawns and squid, and at the top are fish. Things like herbicides are designed to kill plants. They're a herbicide. They're used on land to kill plants. Algae, down here, are a plant. So is seagrass. Incredibly sensitive to herbicides. Our seagrass is disappearing whole scale from estuaries throughout Queensland, including the Noosa. If you're a cattle grazer, you understand if you don't have any grass in the paddock, your cows don't get fat. You don't grow any cows with no grass. Well, in a waterway, you don't grow any fish without grass, seagrass. You don't grow any prawns without grass, seagrass. And the problem is, we're killing off the bottom end of this food web, and it rocks all the way up to the top. There's no food here, there's no food here, none here, none here, none here, and the guys at the top, no food, no fish. It's really quite simple. And just to turn momentarily away from the waterway, and to bring this kind of, I guess, home for yourself personally, the fish are actually giving us a signal here. And the first work on hormone disruption came from fish in the US, where they found in the Potomac River, 80% of the bass, the male bass, were growing eggs in their testicles. They were hermaphrodites. So the male fish were turning into females. In the UK, in the Thames River, 90% of the roach have turned into females. What about humans? How are we going? Well, there's a few problems. The prevalence of ADHD in our kids is going through the roof. Parkinson's disease is increasing dramatically. Alzheimer's, dramatic increases. Motor neuron disease, all of these are nerve diseases. That's the common link. We've got problems with our reproduction, with our hormones. 1 in 12 people now need IVF in Australia just to make a baby. It used to be just go out behind the back of the pub and make a baby. But it doesn't work that way anymore. We're now down to males with declining sperm counts, measured, real data. German and Danish men have declined sperm count by around 50%. They're seriously worried in Europe about their reproduction. We should be seriously worried about it here, but the light bulb just hasn't quite come on yet. We're seeing more thyroid disease, we're seeing diabetes. Has anyone heard about the obesity epidemic? There's a guy in the US called Bruce Blumberg. He works at the University of California, Davis. And Bruce has been working with rats. He took a rat, he exposed the rat to a chemical called tributyl tin. It's quite common in a range of pesticides. He exposed the rat when she was pregnant. Her baby rats were fat compared to the rat who didn't see any tributyl tin. They put the baby rats onto the same diet, exactly the same amount of calories each. Everyone had to do the same amount of exercise. The little fat rats got fatter and fatter and fatter on the same diet. They had their genes manipulated by their in utero exposure. The part that was scary was that those little fat rats were then grown up to be adults and they were bred, but they were never exposed during their pregnancy. Their progeny were fat. So you're talking about skipping a generation to generate problems a generation ahead from the exposures that are happening now. Cancer. I don't think there'll be anybody here who doesn't know somebody with cancer. Cancer prevalences are increasing in real terms, particularly some types of cancer, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, breast cancer, prostate cancer. So I work with science, I don't work with myth, I don't work with rumour. This is the best journal in the US in paediatrics. This is the top-notch journal that a scientist tries to get their paper in to have repute amongst their peers. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. What this study looked at was if kids had pesticides in their urine, and this is an insecticide compound, they had double the risk of developing ADHD. Let's have a look at the elderly and some of these neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. If you get a bit of exposure to pesticide, what's the risk? Well, your risk of dementia goes up 3 times. Your risk of Parkinson's goes up 5 times. What about if you're exposed to endosulfan? It's recently been proposed to be banned. It'll still be used for another 2 years before it's eliminated. If you just happen to have this particular gene in your makeup, this ABCB1 gene, if you have that gene and you never get exposed to organochlorines, you won't get Parkinson's disease. But if you've got that gene and you happen to get exposed to organochlorines, which we found in the Noosa River, and we find all over the landscape, you get an increase of 5 times risk to get Parkinson's disease. It's kind of all a bit deeply depressing, I find this topic. It won't be depressing all the way to the end, so hang in. Just to talk about hormones and endocrine signalling. So what is a hormone? What are these things we call endocrine system? It's a series of hormones or signals that allow different parts of our body to talk to each other, to allow our organs to function. And that's not just talking about our reproductive organs, but our thyroid sets our metabolic rate, how active we are. We have hormones telling us about inflammation. We have hormones telling us about how our liver is operating. We have hormones digesting our food, telling us when we should be hungry and when we should stop eating. We have a problem with chemicals. Chemicals look like or act like our hormones. Now what we need to understand about our hormone systems, this is where we have our hormones coming from. So I've run it back to medicine school here. All these little spots here are different parts of tissue that make hormones in humans. Now the level of tolerance that these things work in is nanograms per litre. So if your testosterone is 2 nanograms a litre, and you go to 3 nanograms a litre, you'll probably be feeling particularly randy, if not rowdy. So an extra nanogram is the range you work in, up and down, 1 part per trillion. That's how finely tuned our bodies are. It's quite brilliant how they work, to work in such low tolerances, but we only work in parts per trillion with hormones. The problem is that pesticides can also work in parts per trillion with our exposure. So you don't need a lot to create a problem. This is Annalise Brackenset. Earlier this year she released a range of bras for women with larger breasts. It seemed to be just an opportunity to put a good slide in. It actually is because breasts are getting larger, in real terms. You hear the men in the audience quietly cheering. But 1 in 9 go and get cancer and have to get chopped off. Bump. Bad outcome. Menstruation, a girl's first period. In 1950, the average age was 17. Today, 11. Something's happening, people. Something is definitely happening to our hormones. What about the boys? Well, the boys are getting smaller testicles in real time. The boys are getting shorter penises, measured, real. Increased numbers of boys being born with micro penises. Reduced sperm counts. Sperm that just haven't got any swim in the tail. Slow swimmers. You're not going to win the race to the egg if you haven't got the right stroke. Lowered fertility. Later puberty in boys. These are all real changes that are happening in our population now. And the fish give us the heads up here. So I pose the question, are we being experimented on by our regulator? Is this regulatory system supporting safety and productivity, or is this really a real-life experiment and we're in it? We're the rat. Well, endosulfan is an organochlorine insecticide, a very useful one, but a really dangerous one. Endosulfan moves huge distances from where it's applied. It's found in polar bears, it's found in whales, in the Antarctic. You can't control where this stuff goes. Even though you apply it here and you apply it safely, you use the label and you do everything right, you can't control where it goes. It ends up in places you wouldn't dream of. Now, in Europe, they do have some notion of precaution, precautionary principle. So let's not have the harm, let's avoid the harm, let's be safe, just in case, let's take it off the shelf. Well, Australia reviewed this same product only 2 years ago, and they said, you know what? The way we use it, it's fine. Keep on going. Safe as houses. Meanwhile, a further 60 countries withdrew the chemical and said, you know what, it looks pretty dangerous for me, I'm out. No more endosulfan for me, it's too dangerous. December 09, after a lot of pressure, they looked at it again and said, you know what, it's still safe in Australia. It really, really is still safe. We have nothing to worry about in Australia. What we're doing is safe, it's safe, it's safe, it's safe, it's safe. If I say safe long enough, you'll believe me. October 2010, endosulfan removal is announced. With a 2-year phase-out period, and the APVMA were very concerned that this chemical was not safe. I was shocked. Couldn't believe it. And they said that the toxicity was highest on aquatic animals. I said, below me now, aquatic animals. Amazing. This is your regulator. Within New South Wales at least, there's a thing called the State of the Environment Report. They're done every year, and they're kind of a broad-based update of how we're going. How are we doing on a range of a bit of a scorecard. And this is a quote, the situation remains now. Now we don't go looking for chemicals in our waterway. That Healthy Waterways report card, they don't look for chemicals. There's no measurement of chemical contamination of waterways. And if they do undertake work, they simply hide the data.